This week on the show, we'll talk about eBay dropping American Express and we'll recap their summer seller check-in. What is up, Galaxians? Welcome to big episode number 250 of the Galaxy CDs, Rocks, and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. My name is still Ryan, and I will still be your host. I was telling somebody the other day, it's hard to imagine. If you'd have told me 4 years ago when I started this thing that I would do 250 of these, plus all the other videos and episodes I've done over that time, I probably would not have believed it. But here we are at Big 250, and we've got some big stuff to talk about this week in the news, and then a little bit of a what sold recap in the end. Not a ton. It was a pretty good week here at the Galaxy, but not a lot of big stuff going out of here. And I'll also talk about a pretty nice buy that I had last week. But let's get started with this reselling news.
News updates.
So eBay had their summer seller recap on Thursday, which was interesting. There was some, as is the case with these things anymore, there was a lot of kind of recapping of things that they've already done or already announced. So there wasn't a ton of new stuff, but there were a couple of pretty interesting tidbits. The big one being around feedback, which we'll get into here in just a moment. To start, they announced that the eBay for Business Facebook page is actually going to be merging with the regular eBay Facebook page. The explanation for that was not super clear. I think they just want to consolidate everything into one place. They do promise that you can expect the same level of service from the new merged account that you got from the previous one. Although, to be fair, the last couple of times I've contacted eBay for Business, I didn't really get much satisfaction from them, but that's neither here nor there. They said that this will probably be completed by the middle of August, if I remember correctly. Also, they are aware of a lot of concerns from sellers regarding the current state of the feedback system, which is something I've commented on this show over the last, particularly probably over the last 6 months. And if they weren't before, they certainly were throughout the course of this event, because a significant portion of the comments in both the Q&A section and the regular chat were revolving around the feedback system and how sellers view it primarily as broken. So rather than me recap the specifics, they had Andrea Stairs, who's the VP of, Global Regulatory Monetization and Trust, or something like that, give a speech, little 3-4 minute thing. And I'm just going to play for you the clip of what she said regarding what her and her team are doing about feedback.
So, first of all, I know that recently the changes we've made to feedback, and particularly to negative and neutral feedback removal, have caused frustration in the community, because in some cases they've made it harder to have feedback removed in situations where you should have been protected. My team and I have been listening to your concerns, and I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts. They're very direct, but they're very helpful. And I also want to acknowledge how important feedback and the whole feedback system is to all of us in the eBay community. I know that you all work exceptionally hard to earn and keep high positive feedback ratings, and that is very important to you as you run your businesses, and to us as we manage the overall community. We agree that feedback should be fair and transparent to both buyers and sellers, so that it can create and support trust in our platform. And trust in eBay is one of the most critical foundational elements that allows the marketplace to continue and to thrive. So what I want to do today is walk through some of the changes we've made, why we made them, and what we're doing to address some of the concerns that you've raised. Let me start by going back in time a little bit. Last year, we realized that our feedback removal policies had a certain degree of arbitrariness to them. It was making things quite inconsistent in terms of when feedback was being removed, And so we were creating some unfair experiences both for our buyers and our sellers. We began to work to create a more streamlined and consistent process for sellers to ask for feedback removals that didn't depend on who you were, how you asked, or when you asked for the feedback to be removed. So that all seems very reasonable. But as we made those changes, what we found was that we had gaps in our underlying policies, so that some of the feedback removal requests were then getting rejected in situations where we really ought to be protecting you, the sellers. My team and I have been very seized by this, and we take full responsibility for these gaps, obviously. And we've been working really hard on making updates to the policy to address these gaps where feedback removal should be granted. In fact, we have more than a dozen policy changes queued up to take effect in the coming days, and we're also dedicating staff to finding and investigating more inconsistencies. What this means for you is that when you submit the form via Seller Help to request feedback removal, the team will be able to remove feedback in more scenarios and do so more consistently. And we're going to be adding more use cases where feedback removal is warranted. As an example, we'll be removing feedback when a seller denies a buyer's negative feedback that occurs when a seller denies a buyer's cancellation request. Because per our policy, you as a seller have discretion to accept or deny a cancellation request. And so if you get negative feedback on that basis, it should be removed. While we continue to evolve our feedback policies to make sure that both buyers and sellers have a safe and fair marketplace, we also want to be much more transparent with you, our community, about the changes we're making.
So that all sounds pretty good. I know a lot of sellers will probably greet all of that with, shall we say, skepticism. eBay has promised some things in the past and has not actually fully delivered. So hopefully they do in this case. It seems like there's a big push to try to get it to be more consistent and to be more open. I can tell you from my personal experience, this goes back, 10 months ago, but I got the one lone negative feedback I currently have against my account from a person who made 3 purchases within 2 days, and they left negative feedback with the exact same comment on all 3 of those purchases. I requested feedback removal and was denied on 2 occasions, once through the form and once through contacting the aforementioned eBay for Business account over on Facebook. I looked several months later, and that person's other 2 feedbacks were now gone. So in that case, a person left 3 feedbacks and 2 of the 3 were removed and the other one was not. So that's the kind of stuff I think they're talking about when they talk about trying to be more consistent about fixing incorrect or abusive feedback. So hopefully that actually works out. If you're watching on YouTube, you can let me know in the comments down below what you think of any of that. But if they do what they say they're going to do, and it'll be really interesting. She said there's like a dozen changes coming in the coming days. So I would expect that we're going to see some stuff happening on that front very, very soon, which is good news for everyone. Again, there were just a lot of recaps of things that were already done or put in place. They talked again about the re-commerce report that we talked about in last week's episode. The big push they were talking about advertising. And there was, again, a really big push for sellers to embrace their new offsite ad program. I've talked about that before. I know there are some people out there that have run some tests on it. I've seen comments from a couple people. They did not find it to be particularly effective. Some of those things are going to work better for some sellers than others. Your mileage obviously may vary. Some people may be quite successful with it, but there's a big push for them to grow that because I think they've probably hit the cap of the amount of money that they can make from the current cost per click model and from the promoted listing standard, where I think a lot of sellers have kind of maxed out. I'm running, as I've talked about here, about a year ago this time, I bumped my percentage up to 7. Every morning I go in and look, and I do new promotions from listings that I've done over the last couple of days, and I see the eBay recommended percentage sometimes ratcheting it up 10, 11, 12%, and I'm just not going to do it. I've got really good margins, but I'm not willing to give eBay more than I'm giving them right now. Essentially, I'm already average is probably with the regular fees and the promoted fees on items that sell through that program, it's 20% essentially. that's plenty, in my opinion. So, again, you can let me know what you think of any of that. They talked also about a nice summary of the My Fitment program for eBay Motors and how they acquired that business and how that's going, which was pretty cool. If you sell an automotive, that's a really nice looking program. A discussion about the changes made to the product research tool, which was formerly known as TerraPeak. There are further enhancements to that program and that tool to be coming to make it even better for sellers, but they weren't exceptionally clear on what those might be. So watch this space for changes there. They announced the next edition of eBay Open. The virtual event will be accompanied by some local events as well and is scheduled for September 25th and 26th. So if that's your jam, you can think about that coming up in September. There are also some changes coming to the order update screen to make it easier to use, which will include a pretty nice buyer details pop-up. They showed it in the live where when a buyer makes a purchase, you'll be able to click on their name within the order screen, and it'll just pop up this little box with the seller's or the buyer's information, what their feedback score is, and all that kind of stuff. So that was actually pretty cool. I think that will be helpful if you want to take a look at your buyer to see what kind of experience you might be about to have. Kind of going back to the episode we did on Wednesday with the live on kind of bad buyers and whatnot. The active listings screen is already had some updates, but it's going to continue to get more changes to what they said was further streamline it and make it more efficient to use. They shared a few images of some test screens, but they said these were not actually the final versions of this. So there's probably still some changes to come there. But that's coming in the next few months, it sounds like. There were some additional changes coming to viewing feedback as well. If you're a buyer and you want to see the seller's feedback, they are trying to make it so that if it's an item that you have that you sell regularly, so it's a replenishment style item, that when a customer is looking at that item and they click on your feedback, it will show feedback that you have received for selling that exact item. If you're a seller like me, where everything pretty much is one-offs, they will show you, hopefully, relevant items. So if you're looking at a CD and you click my feedback, it will show you feedback I have received for other CDs that I have sold, which is kind of a useful tool because I want to know as a buyer, at least theoretically, how this seller does when they're selling item X, whatever it is, a book, a CD, whatever the case may be. So that is actually a pretty cool tool. We'll see how that works. They talked again about eBay's international shipping program and how amazing it is. I tend to agree with them for the most part. I've been very happy with the program once it worked through some of those initial bugs. But they did say that in the mobile app, if you are not using the international shipping program, they are going to add custom forms to shipping labels on mobile, which will be helpful for any of you that are still using your own international shipping. There are further updates coming also to the newest version of messaging, which they say will make it look and feel more like traditional messaging services. So it'll be a little more intuitive to use, or so they say. And they'll also be adding some filters to allow you to better search and categorize items in your messaging folder. I initially was kind of skeptical about the new messaging app. Having used it now for quite some time, I actually find myself liking it. So it is, they continue to work on it to improve it. So all in all, it was an interesting session. Nothing there super exciting other than potentially what's going on with feedback. If they actually pull that off, that will be really helpful for sellers, and hopefully will get sellers to feel a lot more comfortable about what's going on in feedback. Moving on into other news, eBay announced on Wednesday, I did post this over on my Instagram. If you're not following me over there, it's at Galaxy CDs Rocks. This article is on ABC News. And of course, as always, these will be in the show notes in the video description. Down below, online marketplace eBay to drop American Express, citing fees, and says customers have other options. Online marketplace behemoth eBay said it plans to no longer accept American Express, citing what the company says are, quote, unacceptably high fees and that customers have other payment options available to shop online. It's a notable blow to American Express, whose customers are often the most attractive among merchants and spend the most money per month on their cards, this article says. But it's also not the first time merchants have voiced opposition to AMEX's business practices by walking away, most notably the warehouse chain Costco nearly a decade ago. After careful consideration, eBay has decided to no longer accept American Express globally, effective on August 17th, due to, again, the unacceptably high fees American Express charges for processing credit card transactions, said eBay spokesman Scott Overland in a statement. I can tell you, going back 24 odd years, when I opened my retail store, Galaxy CDs, back in 2000, I set up to take credit card and I took MasterCard and Visa and Discover. I did not take American Express for that very reason. The fees are substantially higher than they are with other cards, and it just didn't look on balance like it was going to represent enough revenue for it to matter to me to not take it. Plus the fact that most people do have, in addition to American Express, generally some other payment card, be it a Visa, a MasterCard, a debit card branded with one or the other of those. So I don't think this is going to affect eBay negatively at all. Overland said that eBay customers have become aware of new ways to pay for items, making payments more competitive than ever before, and AMEX was no longer a necessary partner for eBay. They've increasingly been offering customers buy now, pay later options on purchases through Apple Pay, PayPal, and other companies like Klarna and Affirm as well. We know that the vast majority of eBay customers are willing to use alternative payment options to continue enjoying buying and selling on our marketplace, he said. These online merchants generally have become increasingly combative with payment processors in recent years over fees they charge to accept payments. Amazon had a similar fight with Visa in the UK roughly 2 years ago, where Amazon threatened to drop Visa as a payment acceptance type over what it also called high fees. Visa and Amazon did resolve their differences, and there was no disruption of service. Like other payment processors, AMEX, as you know, takes a percentage of each transaction a merchant processes on their network. The fee varies by industry, and the fees that the largest merchants pay are typically a closely guarded trade secret. The National Retail Federation says the average fee to accept credit card is roughly 2%, but can be as high as 4% on cards like AMEX. I can tell you, again, this was a long time ago. My Visa transaction fees were like 1.59%, and American Express was asking for like 3.5%. So it doesn't sound like a lot of money, and I probably would not have taken a lot of American Express, but I just couldn't justify doing it. And here, obviously, eBay has come to the same conclusion. In a statement, American Express says eBay's cost to accept Amex cards is, quote, comparable to what eBay pays for similar cards on other networks, and that Amex card members typically spend double at eBay what is spent on other networks. So that is interesting, and it'll be interesting to see if this does affect eBay's sales at all. Again, my expectation would be I'm on eBay's side on this. I don't think it'll have any kind of negative effect on them. We find eBay's decision to drop American Express as a payment choice for consumers to be inconsistent with their stated desire to increase competition at the point of sale, said Adam Iserlis, a spokesman for Amex. They have been on an aggressive campaign under their new CEO, Steve Squeri, to be more universally accepted payment option across all merchants in an effort to combat the negative image that Amex is less accepted and only available for its card members for travel, dining, high-end shops, or in dense urban areas. And again, they have always, going back to even when I was a kid, their advertising always made it seem like it was an exclusive card that was for use in exclusive places, and they've kind of changed their approach. They want it to be accepted everywhere. They want you to use your American Express at Taco Bell or whatever the case may be, or on eBay. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily representative of where that market is at this time. Amex says its cards are now accepted at 99% of the places that Visa and MasterCard are accepted, a metric they say they achieved in 2019, but there have been setbacks along the way. When Costco, for instance, announced it would drop American Express, it was a major blow to Amex since Costco represented roughly 10% of card member loans and roughly $80 billion in network volumes. It was also one of their most prominent partnerships. Analysts at Keefe, Broyette, and Woods estimate that eBay may represent roughly 0.5% of Amex's worldwide network volume, and it's unlikely that Amex will budge much on their pricing with eBay. So again, let me know if you're watching on YouTube down in the comments below what you think of that. I don't have any issue with it. They did talk about this also during the summer seller check-in and mentioned that if you are using Amex as a seller, as like your primary source for paying for any of your fees and that ability is also going to go away. So this is not just for buying items on eBay. They are eliminating it completely. So if you use it as a seller on there for payment of fees or buying labels or anything like that, that's going to go away as well. This last thing is just an interesting, was raised by a reader, I guess, over on e-commerce bites. We've talked about Etsy making some changes to their programs. And one of the things that they did to try to eliminate the scammers from opening new shops was to institute this new shop fee, which is $15. And there is now someone suggesting that that fee might not be high enough. Fraud targeting Etsy sellers became so rampant that in February, Etsy instituted a new $15 fee for opening a shop. One person suggested recently that the marketplace should raise that fee by a significant amount. Daniel Sodkowitz said the fee was a good way to stop spam and resellers who could just keep creating new accounts for free after being banned, and said, why not increase it more? He said serious makers should be willing to pay a few hundred to get in, and the marketplace would increase quality over quantity of sellers. I don't think Etsy lacks products. I like Etsy with fewer choices, but from domestic artists. I don't know about you. I would not pay hundreds of dollars up front. I'm a serious seller. I'm not paying hundreds of dollars to be on somebody's platform. $15, I feel like if you're a self-employed artisan making stuff, 15, 20, I don't know, maybe $25 to set up a shop on Etsy. I can buy hundreds of dollars. You can let me know if you're watching. Yeah, if you think that's a viable option. But I mean, I guess it's cheaper than opening a storefront, and it's still cheaper than creating your whole own website. But my goodness, hundreds? I don't think so. This person founded an inventory management service, Geek Seller. They posted this on LinkedIn, where Etsy seller and consultant Cindy Baldassi disagreed. They've advertised for years now that anyone can start a business for 20 cents, which is true. The old setup used to be, I think you got your first 5 listings free, if I remember right. And then from there, they were only 20 cents a piece. And bragged about how so many small sellers got their start on Etsy from almost nothing, how women can make a flexible living, etc. So it's honestly quite galling to see them gloat about this now. Sharon Zimmerman agreed and pointed out that new sellers confronting a high new shop fee on Etsy might find it more advantageous to use the fee instead to start a Shopify shop. Baldassi agreed and contrasted Etsy fees to those of Amazon Handmade, which has no sign-up fee and no monthly shop fee. The CEO over at Etsy, Josh Silverman, shared some thoughts about the new fee during a presentation with the JP Morgan Global Technology Media and Communications Conference last week, when he said the following, quote, "We just launched a $15 onboarding fee for new sellers. Hundreds of thousands of people a quarter want to come and open up a shop on Etsy. We want to know you have the skill and will to do so, and being willing to pay a $15 fee is one example of making sure that the people who are joining have the skill and the will to be worth us investing and supporting. And we reinvest that in biometric authentication for those new sellers so that their accounts are more secure." This article points out that he did not bring up the fact that scammers were opening up shops and using the member-to-member messaging system to try to defraud sellers by impersonating Etsy staff, because that probably wouldn't have sounded good in this particular, whatever this conference was they were at. So marketplaces frequently copy others' features and policies, so some sellers may be wondering if eBay would be likely to follow with its own version of an onboarding fee. This is the first I've heard anybody mention anything even remotely like that. I don't know that that type of fraud that you would want to stop is really that rampant on eBay. So I don't think this is probably something that's necessary. You already have, if you want to have like a store subscription, various levels of fees that you can pay extra to get more service on eBay. So I don't know that a startup fee on eBay probably makes any sense. So watch, they'll announce it probably before I even publish this. But while no seller-like fees, some might agree that raising the barrier of entry to sell on Etsy or eBay might not be such a bad idea, especially those who find it difficult to get found in search results due to the quantity of listings. Let us know what you think. You can let me know in the comments down below what you think of any of that. That is essentially the news for this week. The big thing was obviously the summer seller check-in over at eBay. and the AMEX announcement. Stay tuned for the changes coming over at eBay. Hopefully, hopefully they do what they say they're going to do. B, hopefully all the stuff works like it's supposed to. And B, hopefully it doesn't break anything in the process, which is something that has happened on more than one occasion over at eBay. With that, let's get into the What's Sold segment. So before I get super stuck into that, a few weeks ago, I talked about having been in an estate sale. It was the one where the woman said to me that people don't buy books anymore. And I talked about there were essentially two rooms in this house that were full of books. The one room was kind of standard books, and the second room was all some really, really nice vintage and antique books, stuff going back into the early 1800s. I mean, some really old stuff. And at the time, the estate seller was trying to get what were not unreasonable prices for those books, but were certainly not prices that I, as a bookseller, was going to be able to make work. $25, $49, $55, $100 sets. Not quite eBay prices, but reasonable prices for a collector, but not for a reseller. And I had left my card and I said, hey, when the sale's over, if you still got any of this stuff left and you want to make me an offer, give me a shout. Well, nothing. I didn't hear from him for, gosh, whatever it's been now, 3 weeks. And then I get a message on Instagram on Wednesday night from the granddaughter of the person who owned this estate. And she said she was given my contact information by the estate seller, which I instantly thought was a little odd. Why wouldn't the estate seller just contact me? But nonetheless, she asked if I was still interested in the books, to which I responded, yes, absolutely. Give me an idea, shoot me a message, let me know what you've got and kind of what you're thinking. So she sent me 3 pictures, 3 videos of what was left. And kind of like when I was at the sale, one room had what looked to be maybe a couple of hundred books that I think will probably run anywhere from maybe $5 to $15 or $18. And then the other room had what looked to be maybe 200 of these old antique books. So I'm doing some math in my head, and I sent her a message back, and I said, let me know kind of what you're thinking on the price. I would definitely be interested in coming back up and picking these up. And I knew what was in that antique room was going to be some stuff with some good value. And I was probably prepared to drop $800 or maybe $1,000 just on that room alone. That's kind of where I thought the value was going to be. So $4, $5, $6 a book in that room. The other room, half of the stuff in that room is going to be sellable. Half of it is not. That's probably a 50 cent a book room. So, maybe a couple $100 over there. But I was fully prepared for them to come back. Anything even close to $1,000, I probably would have gone up there and bought them. And I'm planning out my budget, trying to figure out how I'm going to scrounge all that up on a moment's notice. And I get a message back. We just need to get rid of them. If you can come get them today, we'd be thrilled if you would give us $350. And I was like, cha-ching. Yes, I will absolutely come up. I can be there within the hour. So I went up and picked up what ended up being 388 books. So my estimate by eyeballing the pictures was pretty close. I thought there were probably between 350 and 400, and there were 388. I got them for $350, which worked out to about 91 cents a piece. I've started listing them with what I assumed were going to be the highest value stuff. First, with the kind of the antique books. Started that project Friday afternoon, did some on Saturday morning. To this point, I have listed just 22 books from that collection, and the listed price of those books amounts to just short of $1,300, an average selling price, if they sell, of course, right now of nearly $60. It was a fantastic buy. Obviously, there's going to be some chaff in the other room that's going to get donated to the little libraries or to the Goodwill or to the little religious-based thrift shop that I occasionally will donate to. But on balance, that is turned out to be a buy that was definitely worth waiting for. I think there's an outside chance that there's probably $12,000 worth of books there. So I'm pretty stoked. If you're into really old books, but keep an eye on my eBay shop. There's a ton of stuff going to be coming up over the next couple of weeks as I wade through that process. Speaking of books, I did sell a few. I think I've only got 4 or 5 things here, one of which is actually not a book, which we'll get into as well. I've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. It's come up in some questions and in my discussion of book selling terms from a few weeks ago, these spiral bound cookbooks. This is one that was put out by the Dayton Art Institute back in 1978, an illustrated cookbook compiled by someone named Peggy Barnes from Dayton. I picked this up at an estate sale for 50 cents. This sold over on eBay for $24.99 plus shipping. It was in fantastic condition. A lot of times in these spiral cookbooks, the comb, the plastic spiral binding will have chips or cracks, or a few of the splines will be missing or damaged. But this book was in really good condition for a book from 1978 and brought 25 bucks. Here's another one, The Bamboo Rod and How to Build It by Claude M. Kreider from 1951. This is a first printing hardcover we talk about all the time. First editions are good. First printings are better. This book was in fantastic condition. Probably would have been worth another $20 or $25 if it had its dust jacket, but nonetheless, this was part of a big lot that I owned for just over 90 cents from an estate sale buyout. The Bamboo Rod and How to Build It. Be on the lookout for that one. $29.99 on eBay. This is another book I've talked over the last several months about the big buy I did of Seventh-day Adventist and religious books at an estate sale. When the Devil Was Sick by E.J. Rath. This was published in 1926. It was a hardcover rather by G. Howard Wyatt. It's a book I owned for probably $2. It sold for $35.99. Interesting old medical book, Hypertension, second edition, hardcover in its dust jacket by Irvine Page from the Cleveland Clinic back in 1956. So this is an old medical text. I'm sure a ton of stuff has changed in the intervening years. I mean, that was, gosh, a long time ago. But this book was fairly unusual. Stuff from the Cleveland Clinic seems to have decent value. This was in pretty good condition for a book of that age. Was part of the big 15,000 book lot, so I'm into this for less than a nickel, and it sold for $47.99. And now your flip of the week. So I was at a garage sale, 2 weeks ago, and there really wasn't anything there. It was a real mess, and I'm walking, I'm trying to get out of the garage, and there's these 2 older women that are kind of rifling through some stuff on the table, and they moved something off to the side, and I saw what appeared to be the backside of some electronic item or other, and I went over to look at it, and it's this Sony EV-C100, a high 8 video 8mm video cassette player recorder. And I talk about pretty regularly. I've kind of not done a lot of electronics. I don't like testing them. I don't, it's more work than I really want to put in sometimes. But I asked the guy, I'm like, do you know, does this thing work? And he says, I have no idea. He says, I used to run a production studio. I had this thing in the 1980s. I don't think it even turns on. I said, well, do you mind if I plug it in and at least see if it turns on? He's like, nah, knock yourself out. So I plugged it in. It powered right up, but it's got a tape stuck in it. So I'm like, what do I want to do here? So I looked up comps, sold comps on this for items, parts or repair as is. And sold comps were like $150 to $170 for non-working units that could be repaired. So I'm like, what are you thinking? What are you trying to get for this thing? He's how about $25? And I'm like, do you have the remote? It had the manual, but no remote. And he says, I might have the remote in the basement. I said, if you've got the remote in the basement, I'll do $25. So he shuffles off down to the basement, comes back with a Sony remote that clearly says right on the bottom of it, CD DVD player. So that's not the one I'm looking for. So I said, well, without the remote, how about $20? He's like, yeah, that's fine. So I brought it home, took some pictures of it, explained in the listing that there was a tape stuck in it. If you're really handy, you can probably get the tape out of there. You can hear the mechanism working, so I know it's trying to eject the tape. It looks like it's in there, maybe a little cross-threaded or cockeyed, so it won't play either. I listed this thing at kind of the high end of the current listing. So somebody asked me, I think it was Tom, TRB Collectibles, a couple weeks ago in the live. he asked about how I determine prices on things. So in this case, when I was out in the field and I looked at this, I looked at the sold comps on non-working units. And like I said, they ranged anywhere from about $150 to about $175. Current listings for this item in a non-working condition were starting at $249.99 plus shipping and went up from there. So I thought, okay, you've got this essentially $100 spread. Where do you price it? I priced mine at $229.99. So I would immediately be the lowest priced non-working version of this unit, at least for a day or two on eBay, with a minimum acceptable offer of $170, which was kind of the average of the sold comps. So I felt like I was kind of hitting both sides of it. I would accept an offer within the range of where sold comps were, and I was going to already be the cheapest one currently listed, but at a number that was at least $50 higher than recent solds. So I was feeling pretty good about it. It got a lot of watchers. I sent out a lot of offers. In this case, I did a lot of 10% off offers. So it was 209-ish, something like that, 204 that I was offering. And somebody finally offered me $195 for this, which again is a minimum of $25 over what previous sold comps were. I had $20 in it. I went ahead and took that deal. So it paid to get stuck behind those two older ladies at the sale and have them, I don't even know what they were rifling through. There was like papers and gift bags. There was just all kinds of random stuff on this table, and out pops this thing, and it ends up being $20 into $195 plus shipping. So I will take that all day long. Let me know down in the comments below, what was your biggest sale of the week? I'd be curious. I always post this kind of stuff, what I listed, kind of what I bought over on Instagram. Again, if you're not following me over there, at Galaxy CDs Rocks, and ask for your feedback on what your week was like. But let's do that here as well. Let me know. What was your best sale last week? With that, that's going to put a wrap on this week's show. As always, if you got something out of this, if you could do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're not currently a subscriber to the channel or a follower of the podcast, please consider doing that. And if you could share this with any of your like-minded reselling friends, I would appreciate that as well. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of your time with me this week. And now it's time to sell. Thanks, guys. You have been listening to the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you again next time.